Around our region, we sell fear more than we sell inspiration. And so we try to say,
if you don't do this, this will happen to you.
I think there's a bit of herd mentality. Like you do, then I see very nice, I won't want to do.
I don't think the designer consciously goes and talk about what goes underneath the tiles aside from waterproofing. Is that something that we should focus a bit more on as opposed to just talking about the aesthetic?
We are first constrained by the budget. We think that, this budget is this much. And then maybe I shouldn't do the bathroom overlay. Maybe I should reconsider the flooring.
At our level, we don't really go technical to understand what goes beneath the tiles.
But this is a lot of things that the value that people don't see putting the money.
If you don't do it, the consequences will be ugly.
Yes.
Renovation isn't just about tiles and mood boards. It's about people and the personalities as well as the stories that help make the decisions. I'm Astley Ng, aka The Designer. Join me for the Season 2 of the SIXiDER Show. Hi everyone, welcome to the SIXiDER Show Season 2. Today we are joined by two beautiful ladies, Carmen and Teresa. And today's episode is all about details. Without further ado, I'm going to give them the airtime to describe a little bit more about themselves, their work, and what they focus on. Carmen first.
Hello, I'm Carmen from Woof. We are essentially a boutique design firm that believes a lot in designing bespoke homes for clients, which means we tailor to their preferences, their lifestyles, and basically you can't find similar designs in our portfolio, as in they're all very varied in styles. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm a senior specification manager with Ardex-Quicseal. What I do, basically, I provide a consultancy service to designers, to architects on what are the important things to support the design. So if you're talking about tiling, we talk about what are the chemicals behind that. And basically, before the project start, we will run through so that you basically get the best outcome for what you have designed for.
For those who are still not very clear what's going on, it's that Carmen is a designer and Ardex-Quicseal is what I call the invisible silent worker. And by invisible, it's like this. For example, if you lay tiles, the adhesive, the cement and all that are from Ardex-Quicseal. But beyond those materials, they actually have a wide variety, which I think throughout this episode we will be touching base and get to know a little bit more, since today's specific topic is on details. The devil's in the detail. And I think like with what I've seen with Carmen's work, right, and why we are inviting you for today's episode is specifically about that. It's like, we've seen some of your works and how you pay special attention to those detailings.
Yes.
And before we go into that, let's just ask why, from a detail point of view, you call your company Woof.
That's not exactly from detail point of view, because it was from my past experience, and I've learned that I need to be a lot sharper in terms of how I deal with people, but yet I don't want to be someone who is out to kill. So it's basically a wolf with good intention. That's why a wolf that barks and not a wolf that bites. Hence, Woof.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, the bite and the bark. Wow.
All bark, no bite.
All bark, no bite. Before we had the podcast, right, Teresa was actually sharing with us that she actually just finished a renovation.
Yep.
It's a residential project.
Residential.
Yeah, so it's fresh off your renovation journey. So I'm sure you have perspectives, and especially from the fact that you are from Ardex-Quicseal, right? I have this question for you, which is like, what is one detail that you think that at the beginning of the project you would cut, you think is not very important, but or rather through the renovation process, you know that, I think I made a mistake. This is important. I want to put it back in.
We are first constrained by the budget. We think that, this budget is this much. And then maybe I shouldn't do the bathroom overlay. Maybe I should reconsider the flooring. But then as the renovation, in our second or third discussion, we start to think back. These are the very primary basic, of what foundation of what is going to be on top of it. For example, the flooring. So am I going to go for overlay using tiles, or is going to be a vinyl? Then you have to think about the time frame, and of course it balances the budget. So all this will have to tie in.
Is it difficult, especially for someone who is dealing with materials like this, right? Typically when we are like consumers, or our bias is we prefer aesthetics. And especially in your case whereby you're dealing with a product that's kind of invisible. It's the underlayment and all that. And do you think that you have a bias when you are making decisions when you're talking to the designer for the project?
Yeah, I think so. I think basically I think deeper. My place was actually formerly a BTO. So they already came with tiles. The tiles are in reasonably good condition. So when you first think of budget, we think of what are we going to keep. You know, so the designer say, oh, I can give you a very nice floor. It's actually homogeneous tile already, right? So they are going to do like a polish, and they're going to polish until the grout also will be filled. Probably through using a polishing method. So the same kind of cement or particles that's released from the polishing will fill the gap. So it sounds good. How long is it going to last?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to stay there for 5. He said, 5 years. Then I said that is out. Yeah, because if it's going to stay for 5 years, I'm just thinking that what if we mop the floor and then or maybe we have something dirty, we scrub a bit too hard, and all this will start to become patchy already. And then again, of course, they ask the question, how much does it cost? But the cost doesn't seem to be any cheaper. Maybe 2,000 cheaper than, let's say, vinyl flooring. Then of course, then definitely that method is out of the world. Yeah.
I mean, the intention was to preserve, minimize cost, and also maybe even go green.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's like it's still not much any better. Okay, I'll move on to Carmen. Since we're talking about design, from your perspective, it will be on design, right? What's the smallest detail you've seen cause the biggest headache during a renovation?
I will think it's actually details in terms of carpentry, but when we first pass to clients, right, some clients don't do enough homework. So they will just assume that the designer knows best. Hence, there are a lot of details that they don't tell us. For example, lifestyle needs. There's certain lifestyle need that needs to be accommodated inside the carpentry, but they didn't tell us. They just assume that, yeah, you all should know what designer. But then we never factor in, right? Then they realize when we show them the design drawings, they will be like, oh, okay, approve, just casually approve without looking in detail. That is when the problem will come later on, when it's all done and dusted, everything is built. Then they realize, down the road, I never factor in this one, I never factor in that one. All this we wouldn't know. And they will say like, but you're a designer ma, we assume you will know. Assume is a very dangerous word. And also then they will say, we leave it to design ma, so leave it is another dangerous term, which means you're basically letting go of accountability as a homeowner, and you're giving the full control to the designer, which is very scary because you shouldn't. As designer, right, we can only help you, we can advise, but the ultimate decision lies with homeowners. Hence, they have responsibility to approve things responsibly. Yeah, so that is one of the biggest things that I feel is the issue.
I agree with you on that, especially I think we all work with certain biases. And as designers, we also can be quite assuming at times. I cite an example, some kind of similar situation. I had a client, the lady came to me, she's quite pint size, small size, and she was talking about her husband and her lifestyle. My assumption, and she was Chinese, so my assumption was the husband is going Chinese. The second assumption is that her husband is not too tall. And the husband was actually traveling because he's an army regular. So he was posted somewhere. So for about a month plus, right, we already developed drawings and all that, did the detailed drawing, kitchen and all that. By the time when he came back and we met up, right, firstly, he was an Indian. And secondly, he was like 1.9 plus meter tall.
Wow.
So one was like 1.5 plus, one was 1.9 plus. And then suddenly the kitchen drawings and everything that we planned, right, just don't work anymore. So the concept of details, or rather the devils in the details, is not just what we put out in terms of drawing, it's the understanding and the empathy.
Yes, correct.
And it's actually a two-way street, because very often it's about how well you communicate and how willing they are willing to share.
Right.
I do want to put a caveat out there is that designers are designers. They are trained designers. They are not. They're more fortune tellers. We can't tell actually.
Yes, we cannot tell. But we are often assumed to be able to tell.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't. We should ask as many questions as possible as designers. Yeah.
Last question to this segment to Teresa is that you just finished your renovation and all that, and also plus the fact that you've got a number of years were doing this particular product in Ardex-Quicseal. When it comes to the longevity of materials and all that, do you think that it is a difference, that it plays a big difference in the construct of the material, since after all it's underneath the surface? For example, let's say cement adhesive. And ultimately, at the end of the day, is that users are touching the surface, which is the tile and all that, the grout. These are very visible. These are very important. But how important is that underlayer underneath?
I think basically the construction or renovation market has evolved over the past 30, 50 years. So in the old days, basically they just stick tiles using cement and it works. But with the advent of new materials and higher quality products, so now we are seeing like sintered tiles. 1 meter by 2 meter. And we are looking at non-absorbent tiles. We are looking at tiles that are very thin but yet very flexible. So whatever that was used in the old days doesn't work anymore. Where there isn't sufficient knowledge of the user, it could be the tiler, the user, or the decision maker that makes the purchase. We could be actually facing a problem is they could be buying a very low cost adhesive meant to stick a very absorbent small size tiles. But in the end, he bought this low cost adhesive for a high performance tile, which require a long working time. And then you find that, like glues, right? They start to dry even before they start to stick them. So the strength has actually been reduced. So you say about longevity, right? So we also hear about problem with popping tiles. But over time, because building will move, tiles will have some differential, coefficient of movement, okay? And then it start to pop.
That one nothing spiritual about it.
Yeah.
That one is just...
Suddenly it's
So in the old days when we were doing tiling and the way that they do the cement is a mixture of sand and cement and water, of course. And then in today's context, right, with HDB's ruling change, which is that you have to do the 3-in-1. And then the 3-in-1 mitigates the popping.
HDB actually does a very good job to study the whole thing. They not only look at the materials, they also look at the design. Because, of course, all this come together. So they also have actually, worked with us in selecting materials. And popping is actually due to also movement. Other than the backing materials, it's also building movement. So we actually, I think about maybe 15 years ago or longer, we did a study together. So actually we recommended those foam material that is actually hidden under the skirting. So, before even the script was applied, there's this foam material that's done, and then there's sealant and it's hidden. So it allows more movement. Yeah, so it is actually not only the bonding of the materials, but the whole design.
So what you're saying is that because the adhesive was too tight, but the building is moving, it has nowhere to go. So when the movement moves too much, right, then eventually it pops.
Yes.
The way you described just now, it looks like those kind of tectonic shift, like earthquake.
Almost.
Like that.
Yeah.
Almost. Oh, okay.
Yeah, only that we don't see with our naked eye. Yeah, but it happens.
So the reality is the government is doing a lot of interventions. Materiality is also shaping and shifting. And again, on the same subject of like details, right, I realized that a lot more BTOs as opposed to the olden days one is that they try to have the bathrooms and the yard all facing the west direction. And such that it actually reduces humidity and also that's where you hang your clothes. That's where the bathroom has got a lot of moisture. So when the sun is setting, right, there's a lot of heat and then it dries up the space faster. And I guess these are the kind of intervention that besides materials, but also from an architectural point of view, they are playing a part. Do you guys take into consideration when it comes to the type of materials that you can use in this kind of scenarios? For instance, let's say the kitchen is going to be west facing or the yard is west facing. And there's going to be a lot of heat, and especially on construction is going to be very intense in that kind of area. Plus, most of the time you don't put a fan in the kitchen. So what kind of material should we use if we want to, let's say, besides laying tiles in the kitchen?
Actually, I rarely consider the north-south, whatever facing of the kitchen. So far, fortunately, there is no issue with all the tiling, popping. So we have been using tiles quite a bit. And sometimes if cooking is not heavy, then we overlay vinyl throughout the house for the house to look more spacious. But that is about it. We don't use special material to address this issue.
This goes back to firstly understanding the homeowner's usage.
Yeah.
Like for example, if you got 老人家, then it's 大智大水. Sure will have a lot of water. But then let's say they are sharing a home with young couple. And then, microcement is very in these days. And is it even a possibility that they use microcement in the kitchen? And though they don't cook, but every now and then the grandmother comes and then she will do a bit of cooking and then she will wash the kitchen as well. Is microcement a good choice here?
Actually, towards end of this year, we're actually launching microcement that can be used in wet areas. Yeah. So I think it depends on the end use. If it's going to be a very light cooking, I think can still consider, but definitely close to the kitchen wall area when you're going to do all the heavy stuff. But further around the surrounding, I think it can be actually considered.
Can I just maybe myth bust a little bit? Is microcement porous or not?
It is porous, but it comes. Our system comes with a sealer coating. Yeah.
So after that, there's an application of a sealer to clog the pores, so to speak.
Yeah. So at least you have this barrier that allows cleaning. So it does not 100% prevent the penetration, because a sealer or impregnator basically delays the penetration of dirt and stains. So it allows time for the cleaning to take place.
Since you were talking about like the wet areas and the hot areas and all that, then this question is for Carmen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of focus on people like spending a lot of time in the tile shop, choosing the tiles. And I think I'm guilty of it. We spend a lot of time talking about the aesthetics of the tiles, the tile size, termination, the wall and then the floor, the tile grout and all that should match and all that. I don't think the designer consciously goes and talk about what goes underneath the tiles aside from waterproofing. And is that something that we should focus a bit more on as opposed to just talking about the aesthetic?
Actually, to be honest, I was just telling Teresa that we, at our level, we don't really go technical to understand what goes beneath the tiles. So a lot has to do with the tiler advising us on the potential problems, and then we will just judge on our end whether to do or not to do, things like that. So I guess there should be a stronger connection between ID and maybe companies like Teresa's, Ardex, so that we can have better understanding.
Yeah.
Instead of just relying on tilers to tell us, because they can be old school and don't want to approach like certain aspect of it. They will just want to stay on the very safe way of doing things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with you that I won't say they're conservative, but largely, if there's an innovative product, you may need to spend time to acquire skill set to apply that product.
Yes.
And that may be disruptive to their work and their pattern of work. So as long as they don't know about the product, right, they are resistant to use that product. And ultimately, it goes upwards, which is to you. And then if we are hearing just from them, right, then we are not hearing the full picture.
Correct.
And then we tell the homeowner that this thing is not as ideal. Then the buyer starts to happen already.
Yes.
And when the buyer starts to happen, right, then the product doesn't get exposed, doesn't get enough exposure, and it constantly stays expensive. I think one of the things I realize in Singapore, because our market is so small, right, is when the product doesn't go mainstream, it stays expensive and it stays hidden. And for SIXiDES, right, we've seen literally tens of thousands of images. To a certain extent, they all look the same. And in terms of materiality, they always play the same thing.
Yes.
So I think that's the second part of my question is there an avenue that designers can actually go in, approach these from an academy point of view, from the supplier? Can you do an academy of sorts, right, such that they can constantly get acquainted with?
Actually, we have. Our academy is actually at our building at UNOS. We have sessions regularly to share about, different topics. For example, we talk about sustainability, how you can actually minimize the emulsion when you consider the use of adhesive, or when you're looking at adhesive, what are the options or things that you think about when you select a large format tiles?
I see on the table you have a bunch of stuff that you guys have brought, right? What is this? This is cement.
Yeah. This cement is very interesting. These are things when, similarly for the contractor, do I spend money on this chemical that is used to be diluted with water so that I put it into my screed? Because a screed is a screed. So, but have we seen efflorescence? The white salt that sweats out all the time, and then you have a continuous wet and dry cycle, right?
The swimming pool always have that.
Yeah, swimming pool, external deck, public areas, where it's exposed to the water. Okay, so underneath the tiles, right, is actually the screed. What is made up in the screed is actually cement, sand, water. So let me show you. We have actually different concentration of chemicals that is added inside. Okay, so I just nice the water.
Magic show. Today got magic show.
So can you actually see the difference in the absorption? which one actually doesn't have the chemical inside.
This one would really go in really.
Yeah, so it's very absorbed.
This
Okay.
one seems to be like on the surface.
Yeah,
Like
so
in
this one
between.
the least, right?
Yeah.
So these are actually nothing done. There's a 1:1 dilution of the latex, which the contractor call it the milky water, new nice way. This is 1:3 dilution. So efflorescence occur is when you have so much water that goes in is kept underneath the tiles in the external environment. Okay, and then it actually dissolves the salts in the cement. Right, cement inside has got the sand, all the minerals, and then you have a wet and dry cycle. The only way that it can come out is through the grout with the joints, and then you start to sweat the white stuff.
Okay.
But if you can minimize or prevent the amount of water that gets absorbed in it, so you have less of the salt that is being evaporated through the whole cycle, right? A wet dry cycle, and then you minimize the fluorescence.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
but this is a lot of things that the value that people don't see in putting the money. And then the biggest nightmare about efflorescence is when it happens, right? There's no way you can stop it. You have to hack off everything and redo.
Right.
Yeah, and then you have to redo it correctly. Yeah, so I have actually a personal experience with this because there was this contractor, he took on a job, it was actually having efflorescence. Yeah, so before they actually wanted to hack off and redo everything, he asked me for help. Us having a lot of chemicals, I gave him epoxy grout. I gave him a lot of strong stuff. It just broke through that line between the epoxy and the tile. Yeah, so there's no solution until he hack off and redo.
So what you're saying is that your product actually, if applied correctly, actually retards that process.
And they must consciously specify this product inside and make sure they use it.
Which means, ironically, your product cannot make something look pretty, but if you don't do it, the consequences will be ugly.
Yes.
Anything else? I see microcement.
Yeah.
So these are microcement. And I think there are other brands out there, but what's so special about the ones that
Basically, it gives you the feel of spaces. You can design your space. Yeah, and then you can have that very natural or rustic look. And we also supply to corporate projects where they can actually continually design, using microcement and have the colors that's bespoke. Yeah, and then at the same time, we also have them on the floor as well. And the microcement, we have different grades. We have those that's actually very hard, very thin. Yeah, like 3 to 3 mm, and yet it's very thin. It's able to take, internal commercial areas, like retail floors, So that's the beauty because compared to others, you have the hardness within a day. Yeah, and then we actually have a special, we call it other rapid technology, which allows they use all the water inside to fully cure. So there's no shrinkage, and when there's no shrinkage in cement, you minimize the shrinkage cracking.
Okay.
So you have actually better results with the microcement.
Would you agree, Carmen, that design literally means to solve a problem with intent?
Yes.
And by intent means you do have to know the pros and cons. Of course, not just understanding material, but what goes underneath the material as well.
Yes.
Would you agree with me that accessibility to that information is actually not very readily available?
Not readily available. Plus, it really depends on the designer's degree of adventurousness.
Yeah.
Is that such a word?
Yeah, having courage to try.
Yeah, correct. Because if you abstain, you will never propose anything to clients like that. And clients will never know this thing existed. Yeah, so it all depends on the designer. Hence, I think it needs to be more heavily promoted and then it becomes more widespread. Then Singaporeans will tend to be more receptive because I think there's a bit of herd mentality in general.
Yes.
Like you do, then I see very nice, I will want to do.
It's either that or 小红书 lor.
Yeah.
So 小红书 has to do the job first. Then when they start to see, have this thing, and then they start to ask. Then the designer realize that there's a demand. Then they start to ask the supplier.
Yeah.
And it's a top-down approach. When in fact I feel that it should be interactive one.
Yes, correct.
The tradesmen are also receiving schooling from entities such as BCA Academy. Are you guys working closely with them when you're introducing new products?
BCA, they don't really look into the products. They look more into the labor portion
skill.
of it, the skill. So actually, we also do outreach at the retail shops. We actually we have walk-in contractors or the workers. We do actually share about the materials. Yeah, and also we also do outreach deeper at the students level. So we also have actually shared, our experiences, product knowledge with IT students. I think we have done that over the past more than 3 years. Yeah, so a few hundred students have come through our doors to experience material earlier. Because in school, when we study design and all this, we don't study about materials, technology, material function. Yeah, so when it come out, it is something very new. Yeah, so we like to bring this forward rather than learn that lesson when they are practicing, they understand it better, so they have presence of mind to ask more questions.
I'm just going to share this statement out and both of you can answer. Earlier on, talking about Xiaohongshu, right, and people getting inspiration. And I think when it comes to Xiaohongshu, a lot of them do inspirational content that even talks about things that go underneath the surface and then introduce it, and a lot more people get to understand the product. And personally, I see like around our region, we sell fear more than we sell inspiration. And so we try to say, if you don't do this, this will happen to you. Specifically talking about the details and the things that go underneath the materials.
I guess it's different target audience lah. Not all are very driven by fear. I think a lot are driven by aesthetics and the whole idea of having this lovely home. But a lot of them don't understand that there's practicality issues wise in terms of execution. Where what you see on Xiaohongshu may not be applicable in our context, in Singapore's weather or our home size, whatever. They just think that, okay, this is what I want, this is what I will want to get. So sometimes they are not very practical in that sense lah.
Xiaohongshu will still kind of glorify the thing.
Yes.
But in the actual ground here, there are still a lot of details that I didn't consider lah.
Yes, correct.
Now again to Carmen, right? And since you've been doing ID for 10多年了, right? How do you know that when you meet a customer that is detail oriented?
How I vibe them is basically through talking to them. So when you chit chat, right? When you ask official question, people give you official answers. But when you just let your guard down, right? Talk rubbish, and then chit chat with them, laugh and all that. Slowly, their true colors will come out.
The gut is down.
Yeah, the guard is down. It is the same as interview. When you interview someone, right, you ask official questions, half the time you get official answers that in the end you don't even know who this person is. Like, okay, let your guard down, then draw them in, then they will tell you a lot of things. Or they will tell you stories about their life that has nothing to do with renovation. But from there, right, you'll be able to derive their character or how they approach certain subjects. So all these small things, right, I think helps me to design stuff. But some other ideas, they may need to ask more questions lah. Which sometimes if they don't ask, right, then the whole project will become another cookie cutter thingy. Because you don't want to know more about this person as a human. You just take it as this person is a client paying one. Okay, we 做完 already, next, 做完 next. But that's not how we approach lah. To us, is every individual is really unique. Then we try to know them well, like we want to know our partners well. Yeah, then we design the home like we design for ourselves. Then that will be the best scenario.
Be more empathetic, put yourself in their
Yes,
shoes.
correct. Then you will also consider for them money-wise, like you feel 心疼 for them if they spend too much on something that is useless. Then I will tell them, spend on things that can see leh. Don't spend on like do the until your carpentry so 夸张 and all that. But eventually it's just 一粒除, It's not going to make a lot of difference to your house. Put your money where it matters. Then they will appreciate, like they will know that you care for their money and not just want to ketuk them. That makes a lot of difference to me.
So as designers, right, we are officially schooled to adopt this train of thought, which is form following function, which is basically form takes backseat lah, function comes first. But in today's context, right, where things are evolving so fast, and I think there are homeowners who flip their homes very often. Every 5 years they flip. And designers are building something that's so permanent. We build already, it's going to last, it's supposed to last. And Ardex-Quicseal's product is also supposed to last. But then, everyone wants to flip. Every 5 years want to flip. Then is there really a need to have something that's so permanent?
We do have adhesive that
That is
allows
not so
to flip.
permanent.
Yeah.
Allows to flip.
You see, when you do a renovation, you have to hack off everything, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to do a total revamp, and then it's very tedious because it not only removes the finishes, it also damages the substrate. So you have to make good again before you redo, right? So we do have this product we call that circularity. So this is something that is actually having a lot of awareness. That it gives you the very the required adhesion, but it's not like over spec kind of a thing that that stick until you have to pull out the substrate. But when there's a need to renovate, just by hacking at a certain angle, you can actually remove cleanly. So
So the agitation is less, but you can do a clean job.
Yes.
In removing the debris and all that, and then it's a faster job lah.
Yes.
And by choosing the term is cyclic, circular, which suggests sustainability and all that.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It only in October last year that this was launched in Germany. And then in Germany, Ardex Group actually works with the tile manufacturer. So not only they remove the tiles, right, it's returned to them to recycle, break it down and remake into something else. But in Singapore, we have talked to a few contractors. Some of them are doing the show flats. So every year they will change. The place is occupied for the show flat, right?
Yeah.
So the granite, the marble, the expensive stuff, right, now they can be used.
It's not just the ease of dismantling, but the preservation of the said product, which is the marble, the slab, and all that. Wow, it's very new. It's a game changer. Wow, if I never asked this question, we wouldn't even know.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It's cement free, and then it reduces carbon emission by more than 50%.
Not to mention the reduction of man hours.
Yes.
And then if you're preserving, there's no debris to throw, lor.
Yeah.
So your haulage charges and all that also reduce.
And the turnaround time, so you don't have to wait a long time for the hacking and then to do the replacement, to stick back. Actually, if you calculate that in man hours and time, there's a lot more savings than just the product itself.
I can imagine this as in a HDB environment where, especially resale, and then hacking time is reduced, hacking noise is also reduced, I'm sure, because it's easier to remove now. But when we talk about things like that, right, it's extremely technical. And would you agree with me that firstly, homeowners don't really care.
Yes.
IDs also don't really care.
Yes.
Archis care or not? Care a bit more lah.
A bit more.
Then who really cares?
Actually, we were hoping to also reach out to more IDs because the awareness is very important. Because when they leave it to the installer just use whatever they are comfortable with. But they could be wrong. Not saying they are no good, but things have evolved, and then because they are working, right, they count the hours, they don't really want to go and, learn.
Acquire new skills.
Yeah, unless the ID insists upon it, and the ID must see the importance to insist on it.
But what about the cost of things? Is there any deterrent here? Like a high barrier to entry?
I think it depends on what is the product that is being used. So like, for example, if you talk about large format tiles, right, yes, the adhesive is costly. Yeah, it's a lot more expensive than the normal tiles, 3x3, 300x300 kind of small size. Yeah, but then again, it all comes with a requirement.
The tile is already big and expensive. What?
Yes.
Doesn't make sense that when you spend that much on an expensive
right.
tile
Yeah.
and use an inexpensive inexpensive adhesive.
The homeowner won't know, but the ID may not know too.
This is a dilemma that cannot be officially addressed. Firstly, designers are not mandated to every few years go to the college and acquire academic knowledge or scientific knowledge about what's really available. In fact, we are receiving it at the same time as the homeowners. If I see a Xiaohongshu, this thing exists. Then the other thing is that if I work for a firm that my boss is resistant to introduce or to allow you all to come in, right, I wouldn't know. And so the conversation will always be centered around aesthetics. Always be centered about what is more superficial and visible, but what's underneath is not important. And half the time we all don't care until the problem exists.
Until shit hits the fan. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a bit scary lah, I don't want to know about a product only after I encounter a very big problem. I want to be proactive. I want to know before I want to consider using a certain product.
My personal take on this is that the homeowner has a bias against designers when we are proposing a better product. The buyers is that they think we're trying to upsell. So we are also working against that. No? And then not only that, right? The other thing is that home is very personal. It's your space. You stay in it. You got kids, you got dogs, you got cats. When things go wrong, then you come and say, you are the professional.
Yeah.
I actually count on you to steer me one.
Yeah.
But I did steer you, but you refused to be moved.
Exactly.
Right? These are all the real truth.
Yes.
I mean, there should be an official statement from maybe the supplier, an association or sort, should be saying that these are the guidelines. And then they constantly upgrade. And they constantly release a white paper and say that this. The good practices and all that. But unfortunately, right, and I'm officially making a complaint, is that really I'm not seeing it. And that's one of the things that I feel that Singapore's interior design scene, right, it's not as vibrant as I hope it can be. I wish there is actually more of this, so that at some point, right, okay lah, because it's mandated already, then I have to go and have my 12 hours of knowledge. So I can get it anywhere, but of what interests me, maybe it's adhesive. Okay, I go Ardex, I clock my time, I understand, then I can be a better designer. Right? I mean, I'm hoping for something like
Actually,
that.
that's a very good suggestion. Eh?
Yeah. Because when it comes to details, it's really accumulation of knowledge.
Yes,
if you don't accumulate enough, you cannot manifest those details. There's no way you will have that skill. So I'm glad that you guys are leading by having the academy. This segment we were trying to talk about longevity, but I think the essence of this segment wasn't so much about the materials having longevity, but more rather the attitude that the practitioners and the suppliers have in recognizing what's happening in the market. Appreciate the fact that Ardex-Quicseal right now has got this product that has that addresses from a circular point of view. And I think we were talking about the how the industry can actually have a little bit more kind of a structure and guidelines in improving, maybe even from a mandate point of view, whether we can have continuous improvement. Okay, this segment we're going to be talking about confessions. But largely it's about their career. So I'm going to ask Carmen first. The question is, was there a project early in your career that completely changed the way you think about detailing, workmanship, or long-term durability? And what happened to that project?
This happened many years back when I was doing this project, right? And I trusted my contractor a lot, the then contractor whom I fired. The contractor left the carpenters to do all the job. And one day I received a call from the homeowner. Ring, ring. He said, hey, do you know what you're doing? I was like, what happened? Say, do you know that your carpenter, right, at the top of the cupboard, he did not seal up the top. So it was like a tray left there without something to cover it, which means all the dust can go in and the insects can reside in it.
This is like the wardrobe?
A wardrobe. That I was very shocked because this thing shouldn't happen. So I went down to see, right? Actually, really, he did that. They didn't seal up because they were assuming you cannot see, ma. That's what I mean. You won't climb up to see what. Then my homeowner went to climb up and see. And this happened, right? So to me, I was like, okay, this is very wrong. I apologize profusely, but the homeowner was so angry until he basically went on a rant. Scolded me, scolded contractor. And then I was so upset because I was in my early days, I couldn't take it. So started, cry.
In front of him, and he's still wet?
No. In front of him, I was very calm. Then after that, the moment I turned around, all the tears come down already because it was very harsh. So from then onwards, right, I told myself, we really cannot assume that everybody know what they're doing. When I choose contractor, I must also see the carpenter and see how they do things. So I will inspect more. Like all the small details, you want to bullshit me, right? I will know next time that you cannot be trusted because you are assuming you can smoke away from me. Yeah, so that was a very hard lesson I learned. Then I have to keep asking questions like, 你们这个怎样做的？这样接不是很难看？ Then if they cannot give me an explanation, means you're spooking me. Yeah, so then from there, you learn the hard way. After people scold you and all that, right? Then you need to suck it up and then be better from there.
Okay, I'm going to go to our specialist here, Teresa. And the question for you is that, looking back at all the projects that you've worked on as a specialist, right? What's one renovation lesson you wished every homeowner knew before they start on the project?
I think very important is to look at what is the existing condition. I draw from two experiences. One experience as a material supplier And of course, another one as a recent homeowner when I renovated my place. Oftentimes when we go, you would have a first look as an owner. We'll be looking at the aesthetics. What you're going to do, what you're going to say.
Or the potential of the space.
Yes. But you need to have a deeper inspection to see that, for example, is the aircon leaking? For my case, right, the aircon was dripping onto the door because the aircon was above the door and the door was also rotting.
The architrave and all that.
Yeah, of course, another question is how long you intend to live in this place? Is it going to be for rental? Like you're going to stay here 5 years, you flip, or you're going to stay for another like 10, 15 years? And that will determine the budget, how much you want to spend. So like my case, I saw, we have to change the doors. We have to change the aircons. And then we saw that the wood, frame was rotting, and then there was also staining the floor. And if you're going to cut the floor, you had to redo the floor, But I think one of the things above all, as a material supplier, is we have to see whether are there any seepage issues. Because seepage issues, no matter after everything is all done, right, it can still actually cause damage and deterioration. You could be seepage in the external wall, and then it affects your wardrobe. Or you could be a pipe issue that actually leaks and then it spoils your carpentry. So I think all this has to be inspected deeper with the ID. Have a walk around, inspect this. It's actually something deeper beyond what you want to do.
Ultimately, it's really stretching the capabilities of what a designer should do when they go with you to the job site already. Because ultimately, it also means that they need to be site surveyor. They need to be able to survey moisture, or they have to have kacang a moisture reader in order to kind of ascertain all this. And then the truth is, you don't know it leak until it rains, and so rainy day then go and visit again.
I think we can minimize that. I mean, no one is expert in every field, but I think we minimize that when there's this awareness. Because when you have this question in your mind is the substrate okay? Is there any leaking? Then you start looking for all these issues. Yeah, and that will at least, I think, prevent at least 50% of the problems that's going to bug you, the designer, after that, and the owner.
I think you brought a very good point, is that the resale scene in Singapore is very vibrant. But there is a huge gap when it comes to like assessment of a property beyond the potential of design. Like okay, if you buy this property, right, X amount would be to refurbish, to condition it such that it's suitable, then you can start adding new stuff. Otherwise, you add the new stuff, the conditions are not great, then everything's just going to spoil again. Yeah. So, in your line, do you know whether there are such assessors?
There are. There's actually building surveyors.
Is it something that's available to the mainstream homeowner?
I think it could be a bit expensive for a homeowner. Like for example, who will employ them? It could be actually the estate management people or the developers. But for like the general homeowners, they may not. So I think it still come back to, say, at the designer level, where maybe more interaction with the supplier, where we can actually share more experiences, so that there's some awareness. You cannot prevent 100%, but at least a second look is actually definitely going to prevent a lot of issues.
Would it make sense that Ardex comes up with a due diligence checklist? And again, saying for the future of other IDs out there, right, that you all can produce this checklist and then hand it over to the IDs, so that they maybe have a 10-point checklist when they go and visit the site. May not be expert, but the questions are asked. And then when the questions are asked already, right, then at least if there is some doubt, then you can bring in the expert. For example, termite. That looks kind of that patchy brown spot on the parquet. Why is it happening? There's no window there. Is it worth a second look? Would it be something that Ardex could look
I think
into?
that's a good suggestion. I think it's something that we can incorporate when we do our sharing sessions.
Okay, so this is the part where I stir. What's one small detail that makes a big impact when designing for the elderly?
Actually, I would think it's many aspects. Firstly, choice of floor tiles. We cannot overlook the fact that they need to be very sleep-proof.
Grippy,
Grippy, yeah. So even if it's not the nicest looking one, right, sometimes we just need to come one eye and then consider how it works for them. For example, bathroom. For them, right, it's very important, should they suddenly feel dizzy for whatever health conditions they have, I think it's good for us to suggest doing a bath bench in the bathroom so that they can sit down and shower to minimize the risk of such occurrence. So this is just some of the things that we will propose to the client because recently I've done a 2-room flexi and I did exactly that. The moment I suggested this to the client, right, her eyes lit up, it's as though she has never thought of it. Then the thought of her showering seated, she's very happy. So these are the small things that I feel will make a big difference.
But what about if they're still able and then eventually they may become disabled? And then when they become disabled, they will need caregivers to do even the simplest thing, like for example, bringing them to the bathroom. And when there's 2 persons trying to navigate through a doorway or even to shower itself, right, suddenly everything becomes very challenging.
Yeah, so we need to take care of all the door width. They should be wheelchair friendly, so at least 1 meter, at least. Okay, so then the bathroom, as you say, rightly pointed out, if the caregiver is going to give them a shower, right, everything needs to be very easily accessible for them also. So it should be very open and not with a lot of glass shower screen and all that. So we kept it very, very simple at the expense of the design looking simple, but it's no choice. So we try to dress it up in other areas. These are the functional things that we need to consider. And of course, having the grip, the handles everywhere. Though ugly, I can only minimize the ugliness by choosing a nicer color, but it has to be in. So we just install it in any case.
Okay, awesome. Now I ask Teresa. Okay, so true or false? The most important renovation details are usually the ones you can't see.
True.
I guess I know the answer already.
Yeah, true.
Substantiate your answer, please.
For example, just we talk about large format tiles, So things you can't see is that we cannot see what is the decision, made to choose the backing, the adhesive that is to bond the tiles. Yeah. So yes, it sticks. So you can't see. But when it pops, then you realize what actually went wrong.
Comes from the invisible product supplier. But okay, before we wrap this up, right, since you brought so many kacang to share with us, right, we're very intrigued with this speckled terrazzo looking thing.
This is actually our Terrazzo series. Basically, Terrazzo we supply in white and in black. Okay, but this we work with our applicator. Yeah, and of course the designer, what they actually want to be incorporated inside.
Terrazzo is essentially chunks of stones, right?
Yes.
And then mixed with fillers, and then after that you polish it like the way you polish marble. And usually it's a laborious and time-consuming thing. In fact, it was phased out I think, decades ago. They were using compressed marble after that. I think that's the next upgrade. Then now it made a comeback. So how is it any different now?
Now it comes back with a difference in the technology. Because with in the past at Terrazzo, they just use the more normal cement sand, and then they put in the aggregates and then they polish it. Yeah. Now with the difference in the technology, we use this other rapid technology that actually it allows it to actually dry within itself, and it means that you can actually have minimized shrinkage. So you don't have so much of the cracking issue, for one. Okay. At the same time, we also have actually, it comes with pigments, if they add them in, so you can have more creativity in the design. And also with that technology, right, it dries a lot faster.
How much faster? What's the downtime?
Within about 24 hours.
Huh?
Yeah. So the next day you can actually progress the other works already.
You can polish or not? Don't polish?
You can polish.
Or after 24 hours?
Yeah, with, there's a whole process of it. With a polish, there's actually a chemical treatment. Then they will actually do some cutting. Then there will be a chemical treatment to penetrate. And then they will start to polish with a different size, what you call it, roughness, the pad. Yeah.
And these aggregates are not, is your proprietary product? The whole thing is?
Actually, the aggregates are quite flexible. You can actually put pearl, you can actually put different type of aggregates that is actually placed inside.
So from what you are seeing right now is that your so-called underlayer product is making its way to the surface.
Yeah. So this is actually our other range of surfaces that ID like to see us. It's the surfaces.
Because more visual.
Yeah, more
visual.
visual.
More sexy.
So if you don't want to see us about what is underneath, then you say, how about this? They say, okay, come in.
So you use this to go into the market first. Then after
No,
that-
we cannot be so bimbo. We must know what's underneath also.
So with this, we will share what is underneath lah. So you basically serve the purpose, for the next sharing session.
Okay, so my experience with like hacking Terrazzo, right? It's a pain in the peep. And so is this a circular product?
Not yet.
Not yet. So
yeah.
it's still, but it's thinner lah. It's thinner.
Yeah, it's thinner.
So hacking this is still tough, but because it's so well bonded, but it's thinner, like it's faster to remove also.
This is another option of what they can choose lah. If they want a terrazzo kind of finish, yeah.
And it's cool to a touch, like it's real one.
It's like marble,
Yeah.
literally.
So marble, terrazzo is like the last time they call the cheaper version to marble because 凉嘛.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one, it gives you the look that is seamless. Like, unlike other stones, even, how big, they still will have a joint. But this one is actually jointless.
And with that, right, we're almost nearing the end. And before we end, right, any other advice that the two of you have for our audience, for homeowners?
We have shared many aspects of the problems, but there's a lot more that can be shared. So if you have any questions, feel free to follow us on our social media, Ardex-Quicseal on Facebook, Instagram, and also TikTok. But if you are an ID designer, you would like to find out more, you can contact us as well for sessions. We do sharing sessions in your office, or you can come to our academy for hands-on as well. And you can also direct your contractor to visit us. Basically, what we want is to have a good result from using materials. So we have a full-time training managers that trains the workers, that trains the supervisors in the correct use of the material. We do have a showroom at our level 5. Yeah. So consumers, they can come. They can also bring along their IDs so that everyone is on the same page on what are the things to consider.
By appointment basis?
Yeah, by appointment basis.
Yeah. So you can drop a DM or you can directly contact them via all the social channels to book an appointment. For Carmen?
My advice to homeowners is to be generally more discerning when you're choosing IDs, and for IDs to be more discerning in terms of your knowledge of design. Lately, I keep seeing the trends being followed, design trends, the wabi-sabi trend and the Nayo Feng and whatnot, right? But the thing is, wabi-sabi is not as per how they interpreted it. Yeah. So for me, a design person, I see it, I will be like, okay, so how come nobody is pointing out or highlighting to the designers that this is not wabi-sabi? So to me, it's just don't follow trend. Just be yourself. Let your designers know who you are as a person. Eventually, the design should suit you and not you suiting the design, which is generally the trend now. So that is my only advice from a very bimbotic point of view. As a designer, nothing so technical, but yeah, I think it's important.
Okay, note to the editor at this point, right, please flash all her images of the work they've done, and then to get a full breadth and depth and understanding of how Carmen approaches her project. I'm really very impressed with her work. She don't follow the traditional trends and fads, but rather she focuses on the interpretation of the homeowners. And she tries to bring out the soul, if I use it correctly, because I think a good designer finds the narrative for every single project. And every home has got a story to tell. And that's the part that I think a good designer, they usually can articulate that out.
Wow, I cannot have said it better, man. Thank you so much for doing that for me.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, right, we come to the end of this episode, this very interesting episode of the SIXiDER Show. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Carmen, for joining us. And if you like what you're seeing and you want to kind of continue to watch this, subscribe, like, share, tell your father, mother, anyone. And thank you. And remember to like their socials. Their socials are here. Okay, thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.